Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's guest is Damon Lembi. Damon is a two-time best-selling author and leader of global training company Learnit, a live learning platform that's upskilled over 2 million people. As CEO for over 3 decades, Damon has gained insights into what helps organizations grow, how great leaders learn, and why Learn-It-All companies outpace their competitors every time. Damon is also the podcast host of the Learn It All podcast, a show for leaders who are ready to get and stay ahead of the game. Because as Damon says, great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. They're constantly creating and recreating themselves, their companies, and their leadership. The journey is where real growth occurs. Coming to business from a career in baseball, Damon brings an athlete's perspective on leadership and training, and where he recognized early on the impact a leader, coach, or parent who says, "I believe in you," can have on those he or she mentors, and where curiosity, not bravado, drives growth and innovation. I'm excited to have Damon on the show today to share his perspective on how to become a leader who can positively impact those around them. And with that, Damon Lembi, welcome to the show.
Eric, great to be here. It's an honor to be a guest today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you here, my friend. We've had a couple of discussions before hitting record, and it's always been a pleasure and a lot of fun. So I'm excited to have you on the show and let you share your story today.
Sure. So I
Let's
grew
talk
up.
about your childhood, my man. Where did you grow up? What was it like?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Quite a while ago, I'm 52, but I still remember. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area in a town called Burlingame. Oldest of 4 kids, big sports family, great family. My dad was always the coach of the team. My mom was in the PTA. I was the oldest of 4. And all my buddies played sports, baseball, basketball, football. When it was baseball season, we were all about the Giants. Basketball was Warriors, 49ers, huge 49er fan. And so that was pretty much what my life was playing sports. My dad played college baseball, and he also ran a couple companies, a real estate company and a savings and loan. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, I figured out if I was going to get to the next level, whether play in college or play professionally, that baseball was really my ticket. So I went all in, and it worked out for me. I was a high school All-American, and my senior year in high school, I had my first real big decision. I got drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round, which is pretty cool. And my parents were great. They said, "This is your life. We'll let you go whatever road you want to go." And so I thought through all of it, and I ended up going to Pepperdine University on
Oh,
a full baseball scholarship. It's
beautiful.
terrible. It's happening in Malibu right now,
Mhm.
but the campus is safe from what I heard. And that was my first real look into, well, I had looks into leadership with my dad, of course, right? But when I got to Pepperdine, our coach, who I'm still in touch with, Andy Lopez, said, "We're a small school. We have 2,500 people here, but we're going to work hard. We're going to play as a team, and we're going to win the College World Series." So he set this moonshot vision, um, built a great team, and I guess that's the first part of my story.
Wow, man. A few things, questions just immediately pop out. So if you're 52 years old, you're just a couple years younger than me. So, and you grew up in the Bay Area, you had to be a big Niners fan with Joe Montana led Niners. Yes.
Well, not only that, um, like I mentioned, we had a savings and loan, and Joe Montana and Dwight Clark were our corporate sponsors. And I had the good fortune, Eric, uh, to get to know Joe very, very well over the years. He'd come to our Christmas Eve party. If you don't believe me, I'll send you a picture and you could see. But Joe was always my idol, and I've met a lot of professional athletes and famous athletes, and Joe was just a great, great guy. He was a great
Yeah.
guy.
That's great to hear. I grew up in the Dallas area, right? Moved to Dallas from Buffalo when I was 12, so moved to Dallas and had, always a Bills fan. 0 to 12 years old, the Bills were abysmal. They were a horrifically bad team. And yet my family had shared some season tickets, and so as the youngest in our family, I would get to pick one game, and usually it was the game nobody else wanted. And we'd go out to the game, sit in the snow, and all those things. And so, but I always had terrible teams, and that we to root for, and we still rooted. And but as a Bills fan in the '70s, you always had to have a playoff team, a team that you would cheer for in the playoffs, right? Because the Bills weren't going to be in the
They're going to be
playoffs.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like a lot of kids, I saw a lot of Dallas Cowboys teams in the playoffs and Pittsburgh Steelers as well. And so I was sort of this blend of NFC Dallas Cowboys, AFC Pittsburgh Steelers when they played each other in Super Bowls. I found myself rooting more for the Steelers, but I had many sketches and drawings of Golden Richards and Roger Staubach in notebook and scratchbook. So it was a big Cowboys fan. Moved to Dallas, 1980, and sort of the barrage of the cowboy thing became overwhelming to where I really turned away from the Cowboys, right? I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
take this. It's just being kind of crammed down my throat.
Right.
And so I became sort of this anti-Cowboy fan for quite a long time. And then the Bills got to play the Cowboys in some Super Bowls. And of course, we know how those turned out. They were rough go and rough to be in the city of Dallas where you're hearing about how they've pummeled your Bills, which they did pummel the Bills in those Super Bowls, especially the first one. And yeah, so it's a very interesting thing. Certainly, though, in Texas, when the Niners were playing the Cowboys in those championship games, was very interesting to kind of see as well. And I was a big, again, you pick your teams to root for in the playoffs when your team's not there. The Niners and Joe Montana having come from Notre Dame, I was a big Notre Dame fan as well, being Catholic and also loving the Golden Helmets Notre Dame. And so was a Montana fan from the beginning and the catch and all that. So tell me, you had to experience the catch from the Bay Area perspective and knowing Joe. Any comment or I mean, as far as like how the catch
I
and
was there.
you were there.
I was there. And that was before I met Joe. That was
Okay.
before. We were way up in the upper deck, and Joel rolled out. The guy I don't know who it was, had two t tall Jones or whoever, and Dwight Clark came across to the back and just made that amazing catch that a lot of people thought that maybe Joe was trying to throw the ball away,
Yes.
even.
Yeah, it looked like it.
But what I remember it like it was yesterday, just being there with my dad. I mean, like I said, we were like way up in the nosebleeds at Candlestick, but it was right after that, and then they won the Super Bowl, and about 2 weeks after that, we went to this restaurant called the Trident, I think, in Burlingame, and there I am sitting there with Joe Montana and Dwight Clark, and I don't any 10-year-old's dream come true.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, crazy amazing. And then a few other thoughts, and we might get to this later in your story because it's more baseball related, but
Yeah.
I'm also a massive Texas Rangers baseball fan. And the Giants tortured us pretty significantly when we made a World Series a few years ago. And the Giants, if I'm not mistaken, swept us out of that series four games to zero. And you had that one pitcher that just looked like he was a high school kid that had made,
Lincecum.
yes, with the long hair and all this. Yeah.
Tim, yeah,
Yeah.
Tim Lincecum.
Just a
Yeah.
vicious, I think he had a vicious
Nasty.
slider, just a
Yeah, that
nasty,
nasty slider. Yeah.
yeah, brutal, and looked like he was 18 years old and
Yeah.
100 pounds, and yet he could throw a ball. It was unhittable. So yeah, definitely some memories there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know the spectrum of Bay Area sports there, and then Bochy went to the Rangers and won a World Series.
Absolutely. So love Boch. He's great, man. What a great manager. Now that he's on our side, right? And
Yeah,
led us to an unbelievable world championship, which was phenomenal to experience that. And who knows? Maybe this year the Bills got one coming, right? Maybe they're going to sneak one. I wouldn't have said that halfway through the season. It didn't look like we had the setup, but now feeling a little bit like we have a shot, right? So we'll see. We'll see.
we'll see. I don't know when this episode will come out, but they're going into the AFC Championship game next week against the Chiefs. I would like to see them knock. I like Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Josh Allen. The 49ers had a really disappointing year. I kind of thought like Brock Purdy was the second coming of Joe Montana, even.
Mm.
And maybe with McCaffrey if he's healthy next year. But I'm rooting for the Bills. I'm rooting for the Bills, and I'm rooting for the Washington Commanders.
Yes. I think most of America, I saw like a meme of that where like the only places that were not rooting for those two teams were like the epicenter of Kansas City and Philly that were
Yeah.
pulling for their home team, but everybody else wants the other two. So we'll see. Yeah, it's hard. Josh Allen's a super likable guy, right? Hard not to like the guy. He bleeds the Buffalo Blue. The city loves him. He is yeah, he's a real great ambassador for the league, for the team. Just a very likable guy. I saw an interview where it was from earlier in the season, and Tyler Bass had won the game for the Bills with a 61-yard field goal, and he had a very up and down year. And the reporter asked Josh, what do you think about that kick? And he got emotional. He got choked up talking about Tyler Bass, and how proud he was of him and how what a big moment. And you think, gosh, here's a guy that could just be on his own ego trip. He's one of the highest paid, right, and successful, and yet he's emotional about his kicker, who almost got fired earlier in the year, being able to win a game. It was pretty cool and hard thing to fake, right? So it seems like he's just a genuine good guy, and good to hear that Montana is also a good guy. You like to see your heroes perform, when the camera's not rolling, that they're the same guy you hope they are, right?
Yeah. So I got a very quick Joe Montana story. This
Please.
was about 10 years ago when I first started dating my wife, right? We just, or 11 years, just started dating my wife. I was at this Mexican bar and restaurant down by the Salesforce building, and a woman who works for me was there, and her husband is a Marine, and they're going to go to the Giants game, and they're going to be in center field. So I'm underneath the bar, and I see Joe and Jennifer over in the corner, and I can't tell if he's looking at me, Eric, or he's watching the TV above, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in, I don't know, 12, 13 years, especially since my father passed in 2010. Anyways, so my buddy who's a Marine, him and his friends go over there. And I never even told him I knew Joe Montana. He goes over there and he says, "Hey, Joe, we're going to go out. I serve 4 tours. We're going to go out and get honored at the baseball game. Can we take a picture with you?" And Joe said, "Yeah, absolutely. But let me wait till after dinner so it doesn't cause a commotion." But is that Damon Lembi over there? The guy, the guy
No
comes
way.
back. The guy comes. John comes back. Looks like he's seen a ghost, and he said, "Joe Montana wants you to go talk to him." And I just remember that because I was hoping my girlfriend, my wife, would have seen that. Been so impressed.
All
And
right.
but she missed it. I walked over there, and he's like, "Hey, man, you're not even going to come say hi?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to bug you." And he said, "Your father was a good man. I apologize. I didn't make his funeral." But he knew all the kids' name in my family. He's like Taylor, Sammy, and Chelsea. And just, I love telling that story
Yeah.
because, and I have that guy to verify it for me now
Right.
too. But nobody
Right.
doesn't believe it.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. You're like, you might have been getting honor center field, but Joe wanted to talk to me right then, right? So
Yeah.
that's incredible. Super cool. All right, cool. So let's talk about so you're a sporty kid, but now you're leaning all in. The other thing I was going to ask you about Pepperdine. So I've had the opportunity to go to Pepperdine University. I have some family that lived. I don't think they currently live there, but they in Agora Hills. So
Okay.
basically just up the canyon from Malibu, and so you come down that canyon road toward Malibu, and Pepperdine's there. And so at the time we were like, oh, well, let's go check out the campus. We went on campus, and I walked the campus, and I thought, how does any student actually go to class on this
Right.
campus? Because it overlooks the Pacific. It's breathtaking. And I was a tennis player in high school, and I taught tennis when I went into college. I decided to not pursue it further. I knew that tennis was coming to an end for me. And so that was in that era for me. And so seeing the tennis courts, the tennis facility, and Pepperdine always had an outstanding tennis team. Seeing all that, I thought, man, if you were a kid playing tennis here, I don't know how you could get any studies done, right? It's just incredibly beautiful. And so you went to school there, and it has to be one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. Um,
It is. It was one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. I was 17 years old, as an early graduate, from high school. I came in as a preseason freshman All-American, and I really struggled when I got there. I just, for the first time in my life, Eric, I had an imposter syndrome. I was like, everybody is as good as me. I don't know if I belong here. And yeah, I really struggled in the practice season. And what happened then was we had our performance review, first coaches meeting. And my coach, Annie Lopez, Hall of Fame coach, I wrote a book called The Learn It All Leader, and I talk about him quite a bit. Actually spoke to him the other day, reconnected after about 30 years.
hmm.
And so I go into the office, I sit down, and I went there as a third baseman, and he he said before I had a chance to say anything, he just leaned forward and he said, "Damon, when we recruited you at Pepperdine, we did so because we believed that you had what it took to be a strong D1 baseball player, professional prospect, hit in the middle of the lineup." And he's like, "Son," and he crossed his arms, sat back, and he just said, "You don't have what it takes to play a college baseball." You know?
Whoa.
Well, right. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, how do I get out of here? How do I take a U-Haul bus and get
Yeah.
home or
Blink
do
out.
whatever?"
Yeah.
And before I had a chance to respond, he leaned forward again and he pointed at me, and I'll never forget this. And he said, "That's not what we think of you. The problem is that's what's in your head." He said, Springman, that was our hitting coach. He's like, he sees your talent. I see that you have the ability to be great, but whatever it is paralyzing you and giving you these limiting beliefs and self-doubt, you need to get past that, because if you don't get past that, you're never going to make it here. And so, I mean, what a reverse way to go about things, right?
Incredible. What was your
Yeah.
reaction in that moment?
Well, my first reaction in that moment was I just got to get out of here. I mean,
Get some
uh,
air.
get some air. My second reaction was, wow, that's amazing. And what I would like to say, I'd like to tell you that I left his office and I immediately turned things around, had a great year at Pepperdine, and went on to play Major League Baseball or pro baseball. I didn't. I got hurt in some freak accident, in a rundown in against Santa Barbara.
Mm.
I was out for the year, and I ended up transferring out. They didn't have the NIL where you could go from one D1 school to the next or whatever, the portal.
Yep.
So I went to a junior college. I played for a Hall of Fame coach there. And by the way, the year I left Pepperdine, they won the College World Series, just like he said they would, which
Wow.
was a moonshot goal. I mean, it's something I've always thought about for leadership, right? It's like you set these goals that, that may be so far out there, but if you work together as a team and you have, and everybody has their back and works together, who knows what can happen. So they won the College World Series. Me, I uh, I got to go play in Cape Cod League, in Boston, and I got recruited to go play at Arizona State, which is also a powerhouse. And a lot of people told me, they said, "You know what? Don't go to Arizona State. They're going to have 17 guys trying out for first base. A scholarship freed up. Let's see if you remember this guy, because Paul LaDuca signed." And so there was a guy named Paul LaDuca, who's a famous catcher and a first baseman, and he signed. But I said, screw it. This is my last opportunity to play D1 baseball, because everybody was saying go to like St. Mary's or USF. Nothing wrong with those places, but
Yep.
I'm like, this is my last chance. And so I went to Arizona State. I was the first guy on the field, and I was the last guy to leave every day. I worked really, really hard. I came up with this, I could share it, a framework to overcome imposter syndrome that I didn't know it at the time, but I use it now all the time. And I had a wonderful career. Hit a home run in the College World Series. My wife likes to say that's my glory days. And and so I was ready for the next part of my journey in baseball. I was already drafted twice, once in junior college, late by the Yankees, and like I mentioned, the Braves. And right in the day after I hit the college home run in the World Series, there was no internet. I'm in my room with my best friend Jacob Cruz, who played 10 years in the big leagues. He got his call from the Giants. My call never came. 15 guys got drafted, and for whatever reason, maybe I maxed out my talent. Who knows? I had a great year, but I didn't get drafted, and so here I was, 22 years old, put all my eggs in one basket to be a Major League Baseball player. And now I'm like, what do I do now? I don't even know. I've never had a job. I don't even know if my skills are transferable into the business world.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I want to dig into there. One is you mentioned the framework for dealing with imposter syndrome. Talk a bit about that, because that imposter syndrome has come up over and over on my show. Certainly, I've grappled with it at different phases of my life. It's a real thing, and I think a lot of people deal with it, whether they call it imposter syndrome or not. It's the sense that you don't belong, that you're an
Mhm.
imposter, that you've somehow managed to sneak your way into a room that you don't belong in, even though you likely didn't sneak your way in, you earned your way in there. But now that you're here, you feel like you don't belong. And it can really be debilitating, and it can cause you to play smaller, play less than what you played to get there to begin with, and it can hold people back. So talk about how you dealt with it and the framework that you came up with.
Yeah, I mean, from a business perspective, I see it a lot on the people I coach or that I mentor, where they get promoted from an individual contributor to a manager, or they get hired for a job or promoted, Eric, and they'll call me and they'll say, I can't believe I just got this. I mean, how am I going to do this work? And I'll say, that's not for you to figure out. Somebody believes in you, so you need to, figure it out. Um, as far as my framework that I came up with, it's something I've used my whole career, and I didn't really put it out on paper or anything until I had in my book is where I kind of came up with where I wrote it all out. And it's a four steps. Step number one is I call it purposeful awfulizing, labeling your fear, right? So look at
Mm,
what you're afraid of. In this case, it was making the baseball team or failing as a manager, and go to the worst possible outcome. Okay, what's the worst thing that happen? I don't make the team, I get my degree, and I move on with my life, or I either lose my job as a manager, I have to start over, or I go back to being an individual contributor. But once you realize that you can overcome that, right? So you label what your fear is,
yeah.
and you understand it. Step number two, I think it just kind of goes without saying, but there's no shortcuts. You got to work hard. I mean, like I mentioned, I was the first guy on the field. I was the last guy to leave every day. And I was, and because I really wanted it, and so I was going to do everything I could to make the team. And I've been that way at Learnit. Whether it's learning how to be a better podcast host or running a company, I'm just going to work really hard at it. The third step, which I think is very important, is deliberate practice. Focus. It's so easy. I mean, you can work hard, but you could also procrastinate, right? And you could be working on different things or checking emails. In baseball, I really struggled with hitting curveballs. So I had the coach throw me 1,000 curveballs until my fingers were all blistered up, right? I was just very deliberate with my practice. And once I got better at that, then I focused on something else, right? So you can't boil the ocean and get better at
Right.
everything all the time. Just focus on some key areas, and then the final step is learn and let go. So if you're stepping into the batter's box, or you're stepping on stage to give a speech, or you're walking into the first meeting with your team, if you've known that you've put in the work, you've been deliberate in your practice, you've done all the work, now it's time to stop thinking about the technique and just learn and let go, right? I'm up at the plate. I can't be thinking about where my hand's going to be, how am I going to read a curveball, or if I'm giving a speech, I can't worry about enunciation or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And you might knock it out of the park, you might fall flat on your face, but at the end of the day, my experience is it's always a learning opportunity. It gives you an opportunity to learn and get better. And what I want to tell your listeners, and I tell everybody, is you got to learn to get out of your comfort zone.
Mm,
And so many people don't, right? So I think we should just give ourselves. So if you step up to that stage and you just bomb, at least give yourself a pat on the back that you tried. Because there's so
yep.
many people out there who they're too afraid to ask the girl out. They're too afraid to apply for this job because their job, the requirements didn't match what they needed, and they were afraid to hear the word no. So if you go out there and you do your best, and if it, maybe you fall flat on your face, but it's a learning opportunity. And I just think that we should give ourselves more of a pat on the back for actually sticking our neck out there and trying.
100% agree with that. The idea that there's no true losses if you treat a loss like a learning opportunity. So we win. And it's funny, having played a lot of competitive tennis, what I noticed even as a teenager was, man, when I win a match, if I barely win, we don't seem to spend a lot of time analyzing how I won. And yet when I lose, whether I lose by a little or a lot, man, we grind down on every detail. Why is it that we focus so much on the losses and we spend very little time focusing on the wins? And I learned to sort of hate losing so much that it led to this idea that it became less fun to play. Because if we're not going to celebrate the wins and we're only going to grind on the losses, it was this idea that there was no real payoff, right? And I think the better approach is, man, we win and analyze, understand why you win, and then you learn. So if you're not winning, you're learning. It's not necessary, not really a negative. It's can be seen as a positive and just a step in the growth, right? So I love the idea that you shared there around give yourself a pat on the back, regardless of the outcome, that for trying, because that's a step, that's a bold step in itself, and then continue to take any lessons and go forward.
It's not really. I had a guy on my show, Dan Turner, and he said it's not really failure unless you quit. So if you fail and you get back up and you try it again, great. You know, about 6 months ago, I have a 7-year-old daughter who just has me wrapped around her finger, of course. And we were walking up the hill, and she was telling me about this little scooter race that was taking place at school. And she's like, Daddy, I don't think I'm gonna enter it because I might not win, and people will laugh at me, and I don't want to lose. And I said, honey, I don't care if you win. All I care about is you go out there and you do your best. To me, it's the process. Like, you go out there and you try and you do. Look, I'm not a fan of participation trophies. It's
Right.
okay if you are. I'm not into that.
Oh my.
But she went out there. She did her best. She came in fourth place, and she got a ribbon, and she's got her arms over her head like she won the Olympics. But I was proud of her for getting out there, getting out of her comfort zone, and just giving her best. And that's kind of all you can do.
Right. And learn, yeah, learn to enjoy, and it's hard for a child, but as an adult, learn to enjoy the process of getting better as opposed to the prize. That idea that I like to make the analogy of climbing Mount Everest. Think about the time it takes to train to be able to climb Mount Everest, then the expense, the travel, the coaches, the people that help you along the way, the if you hire a Sherpa or someone to help with the process, and then if the only thing to celebrate is that summit, and there's only so many folks a year that summit. So if you get within, and there's stories of people getting within, 20 yards of the summit, and they, because of weather or congestion, whatever it is, they can't quite get there. If you treat that like a loss, man, you've missed out on so many lessons, right? And so much growth. And think about what it took to get to that point. If we treat it like a loss, if you're not getting to stand on that summit, and the summit, you're only going to be on there for a minute or a couple minutes tops. And it took you months, probably maybe years to prepare for something you're going to celebrate for 5 or 10 minutes or something. And you've missed, if you've really missed all those lessons along the way and the appreciation of that experience along the way, you've really missed it. I think, it's the journey that is to be celebrated, right? And the courage to go on the journey.
I look at it like, yeah, sure. There was times like whether it was at Pepperdine at the beginning or other things where I didn't try, because I was afraid to lose or fail. But then you look back at some of these experiences now that I'm 52 and I'm like, why didn't I try that? What would have been the worst case scenario? Who knows what would have came out of that? And so, I mean, that's just, I'm not some Tony Robbins guy or anything like that, but that's just what I kind of tell people, just go for it. I tell a lot of people who they'll see a job posting like, oh, I don't have all five of the qualifications. And I'll say, go apply for that job. Because I've been, Eric, on the other side where somebody gets in, I'm like the first, second or third interview, and I can connect with them. And who cares if they don't have a bachelor's degree or 5 years of experience? So if you don't try, you have no you have no chance. I mean, you're done before the game starts.
Right. Absolutely. Now, one of the things that you mentioned there, Damon, you said you had gone all in on baseball and you really didn't have any backup plans. And this concept has come up often on my show as well, because the quote unquote reasonable thing to do is to have a backup plan, right? To have a plan B. And yet when you talk to very successful high achievers, they often say, I didn't have a plan B. I had no other option, so I had to just keep charging forward. And I take something to that, right? Which is, if your mind knows there's an exit from the misery or the challenge or the fear of not making it, if your mind has this exit ramp that it can take, it's very tempting to take it, right? If you've got a reasonable plan B, which is, I may not make it as a professional ball player, so I'm going to be whatever it might be, that would have been your comfortable plan B. It could have been very tempting just to take the exit. And then you don't get to see if you could make it. Right now, you ultimately got drafted to the big leagues. That's something that's very rare. You didn't have a pro career, sounds like, so far from what you shared.
I
At the
did.
same time, you exhausted your effort
Mhm.
to play ball. You're not going to question later in life, man, if I only would have, what could have been, or what would I've learned? You squeezed all the juice out of that orange. And then now you had to figure out what's next. And look at this, you're still sitting here. So you made it, right? And it didn't end. You were able to figure out that next step. So I don't know what your thoughts are, if you've got any, about going all in, on that, or if you want to, we can talk about finding that next thing if you like. But either way,
Yeah, I mean, as far as going all in, well, my parents were so sweet. They would always say, "Well, we should have made you take that offer from the Atlanta Braves when you were 17. We should have pushed you to that." No, you shouldn't have. If
right,
anything, you did the right thing. Tell me to go to college, right? So, but they want to protect their kid. But at the end of the day, it was my decision. I think everything happens for a reason. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's what's helped my entire career is I got this athletic education and I picked up these skills, starting with, well, even before Lopez at Pepperdine, that have helped me be a leader throughout the years. Now, one thing I try to work with the athletes on, because I get but they don't usually want to hear it, is with minor league baseball players or college football players. I'll tell them, hey, it's very difficult to make it all the way to the big leagues. And so if you're at Cal Berkeley or you're at Alabama and you're playing football or baseball, start reaching out and having a cup of coffee with some alumni now, to build up that networking because you'd be surprised, if you're an Alabama football player and some guy, some man or woman's running a $50 million business and they're an alumni at Alabama, they'll meet with you.
yep,
It's just hard though to get that across because like me, a lot of these kids, unfortunately, some of them who had less talent than I did,
yep.
they still have it in their head, and even worse, their parents have it in their head that they're going to be big leaguers. Um, so, I mean, you have to have some self-awareness for where you're at with everything. But look, I went all in, and my baseball career came to an end, and then I'm 22 years old, and it was a huge, and I'm sure you talk about this on your show, huge identity loss, right? Because I mean, like I'm a baseball player. When I come home, when I'd come home and go to the local bar, everybody wants to talk to me about what a great baseball player I am, and where are you going to be playing next year? And then on top of it, a lot of my good friends are in the big leagues, and but Eric, I was happy for them. I was always happy for them, to do it. I was fortunate. I came from a family who had multiple companies, real estate companies, a hotel, savings and loan. But I was super intimidated. I didn't know if any of my skills were transferable. My dad in 94, 95 was starting a computer training company called Learnit. And he did what a lot of great entrepreneurs do. They go to solve their own problem. He wanted to figure out how to digitize his portfolio. So he went and took a class somewhere in San Francisco. He dragged one of my sisters. She hated it. They hated it. And he just said, there's got to be a better way to do this. This is 1995. Computers are hot. I want to have short classes that everybody can afford, that are fun. People can meet people. And that was just starting literally a week after my baseball career ended. So I took a job there as a receptionist. And I did that for two reasons. Number one, I didn't want to be this guy that, you know, gets put in some senior level position just because, my daddy started it. My dad didn't work at Learnit, but he started it. And two, I wanted to roll up my sleeves, start at the ground floor, just suck it up and work really hard, and learn and develop. So, and I guess that's where I kind of picked up this appetite for continuous learning. Probably, obviously in baseball, you have to, you strike out, you have to come up to the plate, do it again. You got to learn and change. But in the business world, that's where I really started getting into becoming a continuous learner.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea, and not the idea, the thing that you started from the bottom, right? In the company. It started in terms of just receptionist. I'm answering the phone, greeting people at the door, and to learn the business from the ground up. Do you remember some examples of seeing great leadership at Learnit, or some of the things you started to learn at Learnit, or the ability to apply some lessons from sports toward what you were seeing in the business world? Because this is your first step into business, right? Into the business world. Maybe you'd seen it through your dad's eyes or seen him operate his companies, which can be a great learning tool, but it's your first opportunity to really be in those shoes. And I love, personally, as an athlete, I love the lessons that are learned as a young person having coaches, right? Especially the power of a great coach is so impactful, and certainly the negative influence of a terrible coach can be equally impactful. But what were some of the things that you remember as you think about your early days at Learn It and observing leadership and those types of
Well,
things?
It's a great question. And the first thing that came to mind when I got there, Eric, was these people don't work very hard.
Mm,
You know, I mean,
yes.
I just was not used to this.
Yeah.
People were showing up late to work, missing deadlines. We were losing deals. And this was foreign to me. This
Yeah.
was not tolerated playing for Jim Brock at Arizona State, John Nochi, who's a legend at San Mateo, and freaking Andy Lopez. I mean, if we weren't 15 minutes early, we were late and we were running.
Right.
And so I'm in this business world. I'm at the front desk and I'm like, I can't believe the lack of work ethic and drive a lot of these. And not everybody, but
Yeah.
it was just it. And I said to myself, this is my family. My family's always been so great to me, like we talked about at the beginning. They've been such great parents and supportive. And I want to give back. I want to find a way to give back. And my obviously my grandfather and my dad were, kind of legends when it comes in the old days to real estate. So it's kind of hard shoes to fill, especially in this industry. But I'm like, I want to just give back, and I'm not going to tolerate this nonsense. And so I just try to lead by example, even from the front desk. I um, answered thousands of phones. I started teaching classes because I thought that that would save money, and then I started doing sales, and so that was my first view of leadership. And going back to what you said is I would say I got my dad, but then these three Hall of Fame baseball coaches, they really helped model my, how I didn't get it from some classes, which nothing wrong with classes. I have read
Yeah.
1,000 leadership books, but from watching them, and it's funny, there's one coach that I don't mention a lot because he was I learned what not to do, from him. And it's funny that he's like a super successful a manager in the big leagues now.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can go back and look at Arizona State to figure out who it is.
Right.
But you learn great things from people of what you want to do, and then you see other examples of what people do and say, look, that's not how I'm going to lead my team. And so through a bunch of trial and error and just kind of seeing what I've seen over the years and having my dad, who is a tremendous storyteller, and visionary,
Mm.
um, I think that's really how I developed and I'm still working on it, my leadership ability.
Yeah. You talk about, I think in your book about the power of a coach that says, I believe in you. And then further, how those same words said from a manager to one of their direct reports, I believe in you, or a father or mother to their child, I believe in you, how impactful that is, to be able how impactful that is on the individual, right? On the person that's hearing those words. Can you speak at all to that, where either you've heard those words or maybe said those words yourself and saw the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, the first time was I was in high school. I had this great coach, John DeVos, who even as a freshman, he believed in me. And I got off to my senior year in a slow start. We went to Lions breakfast, and he had a bunch of flyers, from the newspaper and of me, right? And he said, "You're the best player I've ever seen, come through this high school. I believe in you, kid. You can really do well and make it to the next level." And that had a huge impact on me. And yes, whether you're a parent or if you're a little league coach or, gymnastic coach or whatever, I don't think a lot of leaders really understand the influence and impact they can make on people's lives. And as a business leader, I think it starts with trust. So you got to build people's trust. So they trust and um, they kind of believe in you. But then I think great leaders know how to extract greatness out of people. Help them understand. I've seen so many young people earlier in their career, or people transitioning from different jobs, who are like down on themselves. I'm like, what about this, and this that you accomplished? I said, and that I really get a charge out of that, helping people like that. And I think that is just believing in people and sharing it not only with them, but if they're cool with it, with everybody in your organization. And one of my favorite stories, I don't even know if it's in my book or not, but I had this woman, Laurel Taylor, and she was a great sales rep for me. Started right out of University of Texas, and was off and on at Learnit for 4 or 5 years. And we had lunch one day, probably 8 years ago in San Francisco, and she was just getting out of her a degree at like MIT Sloan School of Business or something like that. I'm like, what are you going to do next? And she's like, I don't know. I'm going to go work at Google or I'm going to go to Facebook or whatever. And I said, why don't you start your own business? And she's like, do you think I'd be successful? And
Mm.
I'm like, absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that you would crush it. And she wrote this really beautiful post about me on, she now runs a company that crushes student debt. She probably raised 60 or 70 million dollars. And look, I'm not saying I'm responsible for her
Right.
getting that, but I think that when you can have little interactions like that, where especially people trust and believe in you, and you're saying that back to them, I think that that goes a huge long way.
Yeah. And I love using the term you in that in a statement about that person, right? So I want to talk about you sharing their story amongst others because that to me is a real it's a great thing that often is overlooked, right? Managers don't spread stories of great success within a team, and it is an inspiring thing for the person to get to hear. I love the expression, you exceeded my expectations, or you did that, like you accomplished that, as opposed to I knew you could do it. So someone else, I can't remember who posed this to me, but when you say I knew you could do it, it's sort of shining the light on the I, right? So I knew you could do it. Oh, you proved me right. I knew you could do it and you did it. As opposed to, you did that or you exceeded even what I imagined. You exceeded my expectations. Shows that the person is the one in the driver's seat, right? And it's just and it's so powerful for someone that is respected by their team or their players to give words of affirmation, right? And I think if you've played sports, you've had those coaches, sometimes the coaches that are the toughest, hardest nails, when you get those words of affirmation, they're just like gold, right? They're
Yeah.
so powerful because they're just not throwing them around like candy, right? They're not, there's no participation awards being handed out. It's like when
No.
I get one of those, it's so valuable to me. And, and it's important to keep in mind the power of those words that we're saying to others, right?
Absolutely. And kind of on the same lines, what I like that you said was don't make it about you.
Mm,
And I've seen coaches who, when things go really well, it's because of the lineup they put out there, the pitching decisions they made, and they take all the credit. And then when things don't go well, they'll be like, "Well, how do you expect us to win the series when the cleanup hitter went 0 for 8 and struck out 4 times, which was me a couple times, right?" So
yeah,
I I think as a leader, you want to you want to have your people's back, right? Give them space to try things, and if they succeed, you give them the credit, right? Like, you did this, I believe in you, whatever you want to say.
yeah.
And if it doesn't go well, you step up and own it. You're the leader. So
Mm.
if I put somebody in and I put them on a project to roll out an LMS or to lead a sales team or who knows, whatever, at the end of the day, if they're not successful in that role, as the CEO or the leader, you got to own it. You can't pass the blame, right? Because sure, maybe that was their responsibility, but you gave them this opportunity, and if you didn't give them the resources and tools or the clear vision to be successful, then it's on you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talk about curiosity, not bravado, drives growth and innovation. Can you speak to those words at all?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it like my book's called The Learn It All Leader. So I talk a lot about the difference between being a learn it all and a know it all. A
Mm,
know it all has a lot of bravado, right? They have it all figured out. They have all the answers. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday who's a fractional CRO of a startup company, and the founder is a big product guy, right? Big product, knows product inside out, has no idea how to sell his product, none
mm,
at all. But my friend is asking me for advice on how do I shift the mind shift here, because the guy doesn't want to listen to him because he's got it all figured out. He has all the answers,
mm.
and they're not selling anything. So that's a know-it-all, right? You're stuck in your ways. You got it all figured out. You roll your eyes when people say something, and you're full of bravado. You've hit the pinnacle of your success. And then on the other hand, learn it all. I look at somebody who the traits I think are important are, like you said, curiosity. You got to be humble, knowing that you don't have all the answers. You want to surround yourself with people who you can, whether it's a mentor or other team members who can help you. You got to be accountable, like we talked about, and you got to lead with integrity. And finally, you have to have the courage to make bold decisions, to have to make tough choices, whether it's letting somebody go who's not the right fit for your team, or shutting down a product that's not that you've spent a lot of money on. So those are the traits. But I think great leaders, it's all about curiosity and
Mm,
always constantly thinking, Eric, like, how do we do this differently? How do we do this better? And now I think all your listeners should think at it this way: how can I do this better with AI?
mm,
Um, and be curious about that, because I think that it's here to stay. And if you're going to stick your head in the sand and not leverage it, you're nuts. But think about, be curious, like, how can we do this better as an organization or as a team, and how can I leverage AI to make this better?
yeah. And I definitely want to talk some more about AI. The back to the know-it-all versus the learn-it-all. That know-it-all, immediately people start popping into my head, managers, and I think to myself, have I been a know-it-all, or have I had more of a curious mindset, or been trying to be a learn-it-all? And I identify, or I feel, I believe that the know-it-all can come from a place of fear, right? So I've got
100%.
this, and it could even come from a place of imposter syndrome. So if I feel like an imposter, or if I'm afraid of feeling of being either out horsepowered from a knowledge standpoint, or above my above my comfort level from a
Skis.
standpoint of knowledge, I may put out there like, "Oh, I've got all this figured out. I've got it all figured out." And in reflection, I think that is a common. I would think it's more common that that's what's driving that know-it-all to be so bold and bravado-ish. Is really there's a small kid in there that's afraid, right? Afraid of being found out. And I don't know.
100%, I'm with you on that. I'm thinking of somebody I know right
Mm,
now, and full of bravado, total know-it-all, but deep down inside, lacks self-confidence.
yeah.
Doesn't believe in himself. And that's why I think they come across that way. Instead of being like, hey, we all deal with imposter syndrome at some
Right.
point. I mean, we all do, right? So um, I think that that's a really good point. And I also think that it's okay. We're not always in the learn it all mode.
Mm,
There's times we're know it all. Like, I got a 3-year-old son. I know it's time to go to bed. This is not up for negotiation,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
And but that's a funny one. But there are times at work still where, and I'm getting so much better at this. I'll have an idea and I think it's really good, and somebody on my team will come up with a different idea, and my first reaction is, this is not going to work. I know how this works.
Yeah.
But I've gotten so much better over the years to keeping my mouth shut, hearing somebody out, and at the end saying, shoot, that actually is going to work.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
totally.
yeah,
It takes real courage to be curious, right? It takes
yeah,
courage to say, I don't know, especially I believe in large corporate organizations that are historically, and again, broad brush statement, bad at rewarding innovation and or boldness if it requires or ends up in some failures, right?
right.
Failure is generally not rewarded or recognized within corporate environments, especially large ones. It's sort of feared, and that's where you end up with a lot of the people kind of doing the I didn't do it. Once something goes
Hmm.
bad, man, everybody runs for cover in a lot of in the corporate environments I think about, because it's like having a stain of some bad project on you can limit your growth, right? People are, oh, this now is putting me in the penalty box, or putting me off the playing field. And so the tendency is for people to have this crabs in a bucket mentality, that is, I'm kind of clawing my way above my fellow crabs, and when they start to claw past me, I'm going to pull them back into the bucket, right? And so that I can push back off on them. And it can be a tough environment. And I think, I don't know if it's got to do with size of organization, or if it's industry driven. I've certainly seen it in my experiences in the corporate world. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I'd love to hear it. The just this whole idea that it sounds great, and I think it is the right approach, and yet in corporate America, it can almost be the opposite, right? That's it's not rewarded.
Right. I mean, I don't have like stats on this, but I've seen it in small businesses and I've seen it in really large businesses. For example, somebody I just kind of mentor on the side works for a 2,000 person company, SaaS company, and it's a yes mentality there. It's a yes mentality there. It's what the CEO wants. highway or my way, right?
Yeah.
And so, kind of, I don't know about the crabs, but everybody just kind of stays below the radar, and they're not trying to innovate or do anything differently because they don't want to get their hands slapped or even worse, you know. So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because it's a pretty successful organization.
Mm.
But the people I know who work there, they're just like, oh man, our culture is terrible. You know, if we don't agree with so and so, you know, you're in big trouble. I I want to build a learning culture. That's, I mean, I look at Learnit. We have 100 people, and what I define as a learning culture is it give people the opportunity to and autonomy to try things, and fail and celebrate failures. Now, not like make some big deal about it and whatever, but sometimes I do, and I'll be the first one to say, at all hands, like I really screwed this up. This was a bad decision. Here's what I learned from it. And when you do that, you get other. I had some guy on our video team who completely messed up this big video thing for us, and instead of blaming the technology or blaming somebody else, he took ownership of it.
Mm.
And he just said, "This is on me, Damon, and I'll figure out a way to get it done." And I think that's because we have a culture where people understand that I want innovation. The only way
Yeah.
we're going to be able to grow and scale is to be able to have innovation and bubbling up from everywhere. And the best places to get that from are the frontline workers, the
Mm.
people who are interacting with their customers. I'm not interacting with the customer. I mean, maybe I should be doing it more, but the ones who are right there in front of the customers on a regular basis.
Right. For sure. Um, and yeah, I think if I think about, running my own business now, there is this, you can almost see where the fear of making a mistake can bubble up, right? This whole notion of, man, we can't afford lots of mistakes. Mistakes are expensive, so we got to be right. And we have to, and if it's my finances that are behind it, you can see where that can, you start off with a very, very tiny company, and then it grows to a few hundred or a few thousand workers, and that same culture and mentality of failure is not an option, or we cannot fail. We can't have bumps on the road. You can see where it can manifest, maybe unintentionally. Right. And, just out of necessity, and yet certainly not, I think we agree, not the greatest approach, not the right approach, or even the most beneficial or innovative or prolific approach, right? It's going to at some point inhibit you. If you have a great visionary leader, great, man, like your company that you gave the example of, they're successful, and yet they're saying the culture is toxic, still successful, but toxic. Could it be even more successful if that toxic culture didn't exist, right? And but there's obviously it's challenging to make that shift, right, in mindset from a dominant leader.
It is. And kind of, if you're a one person or two-person shop, I go back to the whole purposeful awfulizing when it comes to making mistakes, right?
Mm.
So if you're going to make a big investment in something, think about, okay, if we make this investment, and what's the worst thing that could happen? Because if it goes sideways, am I going to go bankrupt? Because
Right.
Eric, if that's the case, don't do it.
Yeah.
Go
Right.
back to the drawing board. And so I think it's okay to make mistakes. I really do. Um, as long as you're not making the same mistake over and over and over again.
Right.
If I don't have a big tolerance for that. When I sit somebody down onboarding, I'll say, look, we brought you in here. I don't want you on a railroad track, just black and white, just doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm.
There's really nothing you can do that's going to blow up, learn it, unless it's, illegal or lacks integrity or puts your team in a bad spot. But I want you to try things. I want you
Yeah.
to try things. And if you fail on them, that's okay. Just don't make the same mistake over and over again. Learn from what you did wrong and figure out how to come back to me and tell me what we're going to do next time that will give us a different result.
Yep. Love that. So let's talk a little bit about Learnit. Where are you guys headed? Obviously, a learning company in the era that we're in. You mentioned AI. Learning companies, remote learning, digital learning, have transformed in the last decade, right? With the proliferation of broadband and fiber and all these things, and now we've got AI coming. Where do you see Learnit heading, and where are you taking the company?
So we went from a mostly in-person organization I would say it was 75% in person, 25% virtual. Excuse me, pre-COVID. Then with COVID, it obviously went 100% virtual,
Mm.
and now it's back to about 80/20, 80% virtual, which I kind of like it that way, to be honest. Just easier to get things done, and I think you can learn that way. Where I think that it's heading is I don't see AI replacing um, Learnit. It just flat out gone. At least not in my lifetime, where you're going to have robots teaching classes. I think if anything, I think Learnit is in a good position because I found that the most important skills people need, Eric, in the next 10 years are these human skills:
Hmm.
self-awareness, creativity, being empathetic, collaboration, communication, delegate, all listening. Those are
Yes.
all skills that you're going to need to be able to leverage, and you can come to a place like Learn It to pick up those skills. Now, we have to, and we are. I think AI helps you level the playing field with some of these massive training companies, right? I don't have a 30-person budget marketing team or 15 curriculum designers. So how do I? We did a panel today on AI senior leaders, and it was like, how do we leverage AI to even the playing field? How do we, make processes faster? How do we get things done that used to take 3 weeks to get them done in 2 days? So that's what I'm talking about, being curious with AI. And I hope that we're in the process of creating, I say hope because it's not working yet, but like a habit coach. So if somebody goes through the Learn It classes, they go into our portal, which we built the technology, which is cool for ourselves. And you could get in there and chat with the habit coach to have it ping you to make sure that you're getting more sticky. So I think you got to embrace AI. I think that the learning development world is, hundreds of billions of dollars business. Either, you know, um, companies have internal staff or external like us, and it's just, figuring out how do we differentiate ourselves and continue to move forward and serve our customers as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I was one of those probably a year, maybe 2 years ago, going, I'm resisting AI at all costs. It's the precursor to the Terminator movie.
Mhm.
It's what happened that created all the rubble heaps where the hunter killers were basically flying around shooting any of the little humans that were scattering around behind the piles of burning steel. And so I'm like, I'm not going to participate in this disaster. And then I started to think, I'm okay. The disaster may still happen, and yet I'm not going to be the one to keep it from happening by not playing along.
Yeah,
I'm only really hurting myself. So I'm going to go all in and figure out some of these AI tools,
that's
and
a good
and
point.
I've been adapting or adopting more of them, and just playing with the different GPTs, right? Chat GPT and Claude, and I tried Gemini for a while. I wasn't really that impressed with Gemini, which is, I think, the Google AI engine, probably getting better by the second. So it's probably completely different than 6 months ago when I looked at it. But it is a massive leverage model, right? So you can really fast track some things through AI is what I found. And it's pretty exciting to see what's happening. And again, the rate of growth is so extreme. There's just no telling where it'll be in even a year or two from now. And certainly 5 is hard to even imagine. And yet I think it's like anything, right? Like any innovation, any evolution of an industry, some positions will be eliminated. And yet I think for those that learn how to use the tools, new ones will be created, and there'll be new opportunities for those that are curious and continuing to learn and grow their skill sets. And I am 100% in agreement that these tools tend to make us as humans softer in muscles that used to be strong in terms of writing skills, communicating skills, verbal skills, listening skills. And there will be a massive demand for those things. There's no doubt. Because I see it in my professional walk now, that the decline in some of those skills, and I think there's just going to be more and more of a need to enhance them. So,
And especially because, Eric, the younger generations are so social media based
mm,
and always got their head in the phone, and that's okay, whatever, right?
yeah,
So they're going to need even more coaching and training on the collaboration and communication and everything. They have a lot of value they bring into the workforce, absolutely,
100%.
but those types of skills, they're going to their ability to use technology is far better than somebody of my generation.
Sure.
But they're going to need to learn those skills to be successful. And I'm happy to hear you say that, because if you're going to bury your head in the sand, you're really just cutting off your nose to spite your face,
Mm,
because it's going to have the train's taken off.
yeah.
And so if you're not going to jump on the train the past three industrial revolutions all created more jobs. This may be bigger than anything, AI,
Yes.
and so we'll see what happens with it. But I think that we owe it to ourselves and to figure out how to leverage it individually and for your team and even in your personal life.
Agreed. Damon, it's been a great conversation, man. Where can people find you, find your book, find your podcast? Tell those places where people can connect with your work.
Sure. So I would connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi. Please check out my podcast. Eric's going to be on it, the Learn It All podcast. I have a great time meeting fabulous leaders there. And go check out Learnit, learnit.com. So those are the three places: LinkedIn, my podcast, and the learnit.com website.
Fantastic. Damon, again, such a pleasure to have a conversation with you, man. I love all the aspects, things we chatted about, and I look forward to being a guest on your show sometime in the near future. We'll get that done and get that scheduled. So again, great conversation. I appreciate you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Eric. I had a great time.
To our audience, thank you for taking time from your day to listen to the show. Always appreciate that you do it. If you would share the program with a friend, man, it would mean so much to me. Write a review, give us a rating. All those things help us reach a broader audience. Until next time, friends, I'm Eric Sardina. You've been listening to the Return to Authenticity podcast, and bye for now.